I think we're going to have a pretty enlightening event tonight. But before I go any further, I just wanted to give everyone a sense of some of the programs we have coming up over the next couple months this spring. On April 13th, JP Morgan Chase will be co-sponsoring an event highlighting the first 100 days of our new administration, which should be interesting. And then on May 11th, President Bardo from Wichita State University is going to speak on innovation. And if anyone has any questions, comments, or ideas about Dean Bardo and things you'd like him to discuss, please see any of the executive board members after the dinner tonight, and we'd love to engage with you on your ideas. And as for tonight's topic, I think it's going to be very enlightening. There's a book that I read a couple years ago, so pardon my middle-aged memory, but it's called Startup Nation, and it's all about the miracle of Israel. When you think about 1948, after the disaster of World War II, out of the ashes of the Holocaust, this nation was born. They've pretty much been in a state of war with all of their neighbors since 1948, outnumbered 100-1, but yet I think they're the second most represented country on the New York Stock Exchange. They are an internet technology powerhouse, Teva Pharmaceuticals, internet, voicemail, instant messaging, medical technology. I mean, I can go on and on and on. It's just a phenomenal story. I remember, you have to read Startup Nation if you haven't already. There's a story in there about how Intel grudgingly started a plant in northern Israel, and they came up with a chip that was a multiple of capabilities from what was currently being developed in the US. And Intel became very worried about their ability to produce this chip on a very tight schedule, especially when the Lebanon war started. But yet, despite the war, they not only met their production goals, but I think they exceeded them. And what's interesting is that when someone told me this today when we were in a meeting with our delegation, when you think about the United States, you think about the vast country and our technology and the mountains and the seashore. When you think about maybe Airbus, you think about Toulouse and France and people walking on the beach, drinking French wine. When people think of Israel, they think of barbed wire and a Humvee. But it's really not the case. And so I am honored to present three phenomenal speakers tonight that we'll hear from. So right now, I would like to introduce Mr. Guy Cohen, who is the Counsel, Head of the Economic Mission, Government of Israel, Economic Mission to the Midwest.
Thank you, Dan. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us here tonight. Thank you for coming. Before I start, I want to thank Bank of America, Dan Sable, for this evening, and first and foremost, Dr. De Silva, World Trade Council here in Wichita. Again, thank you for being here tonight. My name is Guy Cohen. I'm the Counsel for Economic Affairs on behalf of the Government of Israel. Our office sits in Chicago. We're covering 13 Midwestern states. And our office has not been in Kansas for 5 years. And I thought action speaks louder than words, and I thought I should come down here. After being here today, we met with a few companies, very interesting people. Some of them are also here in the room tonight. We also went to the Innovation Center of Wichita State. So first, congratulations and good luck tomorrow. Second, it was amazing, it was mind-blowing. And thank you for the opportunity. Before going there, I'll share with you some of my thoughts about Israel. I'd like to get you all to know it a bit better. Afterwards, I will present Ms. Andrea Iona down here from the Birth Foundation that will talk about how the government of Israel and the government of the US together offers a tool to help making stronger economic relations between our two nations. And then I'm going to introduce Ms. Lee Afghan as a presenter of an Israeli innovative company, who recently, by the way, opened their US headquarters not far from here. If you'll take one number from tonight, it should be that. In Israel, every year, they're starting 1,000 or a bit more than that Israeli startup tech companies. That means every 3 days, pretty much. And this is the reason we are capable of doing that is following. As Dan mentioned, we are third in NASDAQ, and remember there are countries traded on NASDAQ like China and other. We've been ranked second for innovation by World Economic Forum and by Bloomberg. Let's talk quickly about 2016. Almost $5 billion were raised by Israeli tech companies during 2016. Most of it came outside of Israel, US. Recently, we've seen some coming from China as well. And the exits in 2016 was $10 billion. However, next year, this slide we're going to be looking very much different because of this. This week, we learned about the deal between Mobileye and Intel. So Intel bought Mobileye for $15.3 billion. Intel moved their entire auto division to Israel that will be managed under the current management of Mobileye. So Intel has a great faith in Mobileye, and Mobileye is a great company. Unfortunately, I first met them in 2012, and they were far too much expensive for me to get a piece of the Sorry. All right, so this is this. Let's ask a bit why. Some would say the Israeli nation has a certain type of a DNA that allows them to be #1 in the world in density of startups per capita. That means enormous numbers of startups per person in Israel. Only second to Silicon Valley in absolute numbers. In per capita, we're first. Number 5, Tel Aviv is one of the Israeli leading tech hubs. Number 5 globally in the world. A few other traits, but I want to focus on one: high tolerance to failure. What do we mean when we say high tolerance to failure? When an Israeli entrepreneur goes and he starts a company and he fails, he goes and he starts another company, and again, he can get money from his savings, there's his parents, his friends, and fail. For the third time he'll go, venture capitalist, VC, will see far more of a value and have much more chances to get investment from VC fund. Because VC usually invest in the people or in the team. And they see someone who failed not as someone who failed, they see him as someone who learned. He done a bit for himself, he learned once, he learned twice. Next time he has so much bigger chances to succeed. Talking with my friend in South Korea, in Seoul, who's doing my job, and he said that if an engineer in Samsung or Hyundai will fail, will do something colossal wars, he's going to be a cab driver afterwards. There's nothing in the future for him. It's not the case in Israel. We see it as an advantage. So I said people has the DNA, and so they start a company. And because Israel is so small, and for those of you who are not aware, Israel is smaller in size and population than New Jersey. Not too small, but smaller in size and population than New Jersey. And it's so small that if you'll witness any first encounter of two Israeli people everywhere in the globe, it can be Brazil, it can be Japan, it can be here, after about a minute, they will know how they meet people who know them. And without opening LinkedIn or Facebook. Just like by talking to themselves. There are a few short questions. And that helps information and ideas to flow and flourish. So there's the company, and there's a surrounding ecosystem that helps that company. One of them is the government support, and I'll tell a bit more about that. Also, it's nice to know that Israel is ranked A+ by S&P and A1 by Moody's, so your money is gonna in a safer place than other places, let's call it. So all that entrepreneurship and startups, and that attracts a lot of people. Currently in Israel, there is more than 300 global multinational companies coming to Israel, starting an R&D center and manufacturing, not just sales. And I think we're at a point that we stopped counting, but last count was somewhat like 320. In various sectors, it's not just we're good at one thing. We have value to add to the global production chain on a lot of sectors. Here are just a few names, including the 4 horsemen you can see on the left-hand side. All has presentation in Israel. So after that, I'd like to kind of take some testimonials and say that, for example, Bill Gates said, this is critical to the future of technology business, the fact of being in Israel. You get from Philips Medical, they say the opportunities there is staggering and far from what they expected. Bear also thought it's a great idea to be in Israel. If you go a bit more in depth, Microsoft. Microsoft started their business in Israel in 1989. They have now one R&D center. They have an innovation center. They also have an accelerator program there. Very good program. If you have a chance, look into that. Put multi-acquisitions, millions of dollars in investments, a good number of employees. A lot of leading, or let's say, key products for Microsoft were developed in Israel, such as the Kinect and the Gateway VPN. The CEO of Microsoft said this is part of the strategic factor for Microsoft. In Israel, the R&D center there, they counted in the headquarters as one of the 3 strategic ones for the companies. Google, you can look at Mr. Schmidt down there, now with Alphabet. Decision to invest in Israel was one of the best that Google has ever made. So Google started in Israel in 06, which is not too long ago, but considering when Google started, it was pretty quick. They have been very aggressive with their acquisitions, and they have a good revenue coming out of there. A lot of key products for Google also developed in Israel, including Waze, which is recently exited for $1 billion. It's a navigation app. Intel. Again, everybody in Israel has a warm place in heart for Intel. They've been there since 1972. They're probably the first one came in. They have 4 R&D centers. They have 3 manufacturing hubs, sites. They've been manufacturing more than 1 billion chips, microprocessors in Israel. Close to 10,000 employees, billions of dollars in investments. A lot of, as I mentioned, a lot of their new and most advanced processors were developed in Israel. And according to the CEO, Intel Israel is like a whole Intel company in just one country. They have everything from development, design, architecture, manufacturing, and sales and after sales. All of that attracts the sharks. Now, I know there are some finance people here in the audience, and I know they see just dollar signs here, but trust me, these are actual companies. Some of you probably know, Sequoia, Battery, Berkshire, and of course the corporate VCs who are only there not because they have a good Jewish heart or for any other reason, just to help their business. And they understand they need to be there. And I can give a personal note that from our position, we are working very tightly with the automotive industry in Michigan. And we had a recent visit by a tier 1 supplier who came to Israel. And after being there a week, came back and said, we should have been there years ago. A couple months later, they hired a local scout, and now they're looking into expand their presence in Israel. Somewhat about the government support that I mentioned before. So one leg of it is the Israel Innovation Authority. That was up until recently the chief scientist within our office, Ministry of Economy and Industry. Israel Innovation Authority has done tremendous work to help the Israeli tech scene to grow. They are currently operating 19 different incubators. Some of them are very sector specific. They're going on a tender, which tender is for 6 years for operation. they are working under a risk-sharing mechanism. They also have specific programs to global companies or enterprises that want to work directly with them. They will do a matching of a fund, of a joint venture, of an R&D, and I'll tell more, an address, or you can tell something about it that is good. Going back to the incubators, this is how it works. So the government gives 85% of the funding, and they take zero equity. The incubator operator puts in 15% and gets 100% of the equity from the companies they are allowing into the incubator. So you can imagine those tenders to operate incubators are quite competitive. Last one closed in Cleveland Clinic, not far from here. Together joined forces with one of the Israeli largest HMOs, and they're starting one. There are other companies there as well, such as J&J and Takeda and a few others. This is part of the risk sharing and how the government is trying to flourish and help that axis to grow. Before coming down here, I thought, all right, let's see what Kansas and Israel are doing. So Kansas exports, data is, by the way, from the Department of Commerce here in the US. Exports from Kansas to Israel has somewhat, let's say, not a positive trend lines. 2016, a bit more than $56 million. And imports, well, it's a positive maybe on the Israeli look, but from my angle, where I see, I think trade should be increasing on both sides. So we can definitely strengthen this trend and strengthen this one as well. So to do that, I'd like to have a quick overview about two industries I think might be interesting to you guys to hear. So first, aviation and aerospace. Israel is very known for their, let's say, military capabilities, and that comes also true in the aviation and aerospace. There are three major Israeli companies in that area, among about more than 100 medium to small size. The three ones are IAI, Rafael, and Elbit. All three also have presence here in the US, as manufacturing here in the US, are part of the US Foreign Aid Program. And the main thing I want you guys to remember is that adapting military technology to civilian use. Now I would ask everybody to look at the screen and say thank you to this guy. So this guy, Gavriel Idan, he is an electro-optical engineer. He worked for Rafael on their guided missiles. He took a sabbatical in Boston, and he had a neighbor, a doctor for gastro, apparently Israeli as well, and they discussed. Not too many years later, it's not a doctor, sorry, he's just an engineer, Mr. Idan came up with a pill cam, which is a wireless capsule that you take orally to do the endoscopy. So he helped us all to take the endoscopy from this way, and we should all thank you for that. Elbit, remember I said adapting military technologies to civilian use. So Elbit is the largest electro-optic company outside of the US. It has, again, large operations here in the US, and they're having their own helmet mounted system that's like a head-on display. When Israel buys F-35 from the US, Elbit is one of the main contractor to, let's say, to add on to that. What you see here, the drones, so Elbit took their capabilities and their visual capabilities and put it in civilian use to ag, as a precision agriculture. And now they're contacting and working with farmers, also here in the US, selling them information came out of drones that they are doing sweeps above their fields. And no, listen, this end of the field should get some more water. And here you might want to look into some sort of a disease that can be starting to develop. Again, taking military into civilian. Ag is the other point I want to bring up. There are currently more than 200 innovative companies in Israel. One point I really want to stress, and I like that data, is the Israeli cow is the world leader in milk production. So the average is 10.6 gallons for the Israeli cow, where the US stands on 8 gallons, again, of milk a day. I understand that's average, and there are quite a few more cows here in the US than in Israel. But still, more than what I learned in statistics, that more than 30 is enough. And we have more than 30 of those. I want to bring two companies that are what we call a plant genomics company. One called Evogene, the other called Kaima. Kaima is Hebrew word for sustainable. And they're both working the genome of the plant, of the seed, towards a better world, I can honestly say. They're getting the plants, they increasing the productivity of the field. They get a better yield while using less resources. They're using less land. They're using less water. They're using less weed killer, cancer-ring or not. And all along they're doing a great work. And I also say those two companies also have a US operations not far from here in Missouri. A bit about us, and then I'll finish. Our office, economic mission to the Midwest. We're 1 out of 5 offices in the US, 45 around the world, 5 again in the US, 5 in China. We're covering the Midwestern states. And what we do, please excuse me when I read from the slide, is tangible business connections between Midwestern and Israeli companies. That is, we're getting to do the cherry picking. We'll come to US Midwestern state-based companies, such as we've done today. We're gonna understand their needs, their gaps, what are they looking at in the future, and we'll try to match or give them a short list of Israeli companies that are working on that. We'll work on trade shows here, mostly in the US. We'll do oil and gas in Houston. We'll do life sciences in Florida. We'll do cybersecurity in California. We'll do electronic goods in Vegas or e-commerce in Chicago. We get a few dozens of companies from Israel for those shows, and we'll help them making introductions. We work with direct assistance to the US-based company, and also to the Israeli ones. Since we are a government, we don't get a kickback. We are 100% tax-paid, funded. So we are representing the industry as a whole. And thus we prefer to work directly with the companies. And again, free of charge for all parties. This is our office. And we are in Chicago. We are here to help. Each and every one of these members has their own sectors. Together here with me, Ari, can you stand? Is Ari Rockney, my deputy, who is the most veteran in the office. He covers automotive, cybersecurity, homeland security, aviation, aerospace, all the cool stuff. And honestly, we could have not done anything without these guys who've done a tremendous work for the Israeli companies and industry. I can say that, for example, just in the past few weeks or short months, we went to St. Louis with a group of agricultural companies. We went to Indiana and Chicago with a group of cybersecurity companies. We went to Florida with a group of digital health companies. To Vegas with a group of consumer electronic companies, and so on and so forth and so on. So again, our goal is to help Midwestern companies to know a bit more about Israel, hopefully making good business relations. I'll have to say, as a government, we're not part of the business discussion. As soon as both parties made interest, we'll make the introduction and we will phase out. We don't want to sit next to the business discussion table. Anyone has any questions they want to bring? Not, I'd like to thank you all. Before I'll finish, I want to please present Ms. Andrea Yona from BIRD. As I said, BIRD is one of the great tools we have to work with US-based companies. Andrea?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrea. I represent what's called the BIRD Foundation. Before I explain what that means, just curious, by a show of hands, how many people in the audience have been to Israel? A lot. And of those that have been to Israel, how many have been to Israel for business? Okay, wonderful. So BIRD is an acronym. It stands for Binational Industrial Research and Development. And it was started by both the US and the Israeli governments. So we started, soon we're going to be celebrating our 40th anniversary in June. So since 1977, we have been investing in collaborations between US and Israeli companies. It was started as a binational endowment. I always find this really fascinating because I've never heard of another binational endowment. In fact, I'm not even sure I've even heard of a endowment that was started by the government. Too many, or nothing that I can think of as an endowment. But we're an endowment, 50-50 from the US and the Israeli governments. Each put in $55 million to create our endowment of 110. And we use the interest on that endowment plus repayments from successful projects to invest in innovative R&D. How did this start? So back in the 70s, we were talking before, Guy was talking about Intel. So back in the 70s, I think there was an interest in helping to bring innovative technologies to large US companies here in the United States and start some of these R&D centers in Israel. Today, I think that the objectives are a little different. So today, with Israel being this big technology powerhouse, the US is not the only game in town. So today we have other countries vying for Israel to come and bring their innovations to their countries, to set up operations in their countries. So here in the US, it's important that we keep that innovative R&D and those innovative companies that need to expand outside of the small borders of Israel and keep those technologies coming to the United States and to bring those R&D jobs here and to bring the production of those technologies here to the US. So that's part of what we do at BIRD by fostering and stimulating the collaborations between US and Israeli companies. So we are a US-Israel fund. We have representatives on both the US and Israeli sides. This shows a little bit about who our representatives are. On the US side, through the Department of Commerce, through the NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, the State Department, the Treasury, and similar ministries on the Israeli side. So how do we work? What do we do? So the BIRD Foundation both fosters those partnerships by investing money into them. So we can invest up to 50% of the combined R&D budget between the two companies and up to $1 million into their technology partnerships. This is a conditional grant so that if that partnership and if the technology or product that they're developing is successful, then the companies are required to repay us. They're only required to repay us if they're successful and reach revenue. And in that case, it's a royalty-based repayment. We're non-dilutive, so we're not taking equity, we're not taking any IP in the technology that's created. And the funding that is repaid to us is goes right back into our fund to invest in other projects. So what do we invest in? So we are commercial. We don't invest in any military applications. We invest in all technologies. You can see on the pie chart, life sciences is probably the biggest part of our portfolio, together with energy, water, and the environment. But there are always new parts of that pie chart as new and innovative areas start to come up, like now we have cybersecurity and healthcare IT. I think it's also important to mention that of that $110 million that we originally received, we've now invested almost $340 million in almost 950 projects. in repayments, we're already over $100 million, which to me says this was a pretty darn good return on investment for the companies. More importantly, we did an economic impact study which showed that we're now at approximately $10 billion that was generated either directly or indirectly from the projects that we invested in. How does it work? So we have 2 cycles per year for our general fund. Companies can submit to us an executive summary. They do so jointly with their partner. And in a minute, I'll answer the question that you're probably thinking, how do companies find a partner? But they jointly submit an executive summary. We review it. We see if they have a good chance at getting through our process. We can make a recommendation that they submit a full-scale proposal. And that full-scale proposal is reviewed by technical reviewers on the US side through the NIST, on the Israeli side through the Innovation Authority that Guy was talking about, through expert reviewers. And we select projects for funding. We approve in each of our 2 general cycles about 10 projects per cycle. So that's about 20 that we approve a year. And we have 2 additional cycles through appropriated funding, one through energy and one for Homeland Security and first responders, where we approve another 5 to 6 projects per year. So in all, we probably approve about 25 to 27 projects. The whole process is about 6 months. So we just had a cycle that started in March and will end in June, and then we'll have another one in September that'll end in December. This is our call for proposals for our upcoming cycle, for general cycle. So just a couple of examples. Today we saw some of the major aerospace and aircraft, and there was actually one project that I wanted to mention today that we funded. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the U.S. company Colesman. There's a project between Colesman and Apgal. It's from quite a few years ago, where we invested in a EVS system for business jets landing that are landing in foggy conditions. So that was a pretty older project, but a project that was very successful for us. So we're still interested in that area. Another company that was also talked about earlier is Evogene, who did a project with Pioneer DuPont on soybean rust and creating a biopesticide to eliminate that. Another area that we're very interested in looking for projects is in the area of advanced manufacturing, which I thought was also an industry which here in Kansas and in the Midwest we see as one that's growing. We invested in a project with a small company in Israel called Weldobot, and also a small company in New Jersey called Heller, which they're working on a robotic welding machine to bring novice welders up to be expert welders in a very short period of time using this new welding device. And finally, just to in a different area in energy efficiency, Environ, an Israeli company, is working with Johnson Controls, who we've done several projects with, on a energy efficient technology for HVAC systems. Finally, our upcoming cycle is for our energy cycle. This was some additional funding which was appropriated to us through the DOE and the Israeli Ministry of Energy and Infrastructure. We specifically are looking for projects relating to areas in alternative renewable energy, energy efficiency, water energy nexus, and we've now added advanced manufacturing. So any area relating to advanced manufacturing and energy efficiency is something that we're looking for. The other difference with this particular cycle is one of the two partners can be a university or research institution, which is not the case in our other two cycles. And this is coming up in July, and we'll be making our decisions in October. So that's general. To answer the question that many might be asking, as far as how do you find a partner? So we work together with the economic mission, together also with the US government. We talk to companies, we identify what it is they're looking for. There are different resources through some databases that we have, as well as our team in Israel, to find companies that might fulfill those specific wish list items, make some introductions. We also bring over delegations that Guy was talking about. Most recently, we worked with them on an AgTech delegation. We're looking to bring one next year in advanced manufacturing. We introduce companies to each other, and hopefully from this visit, there'll be some of you out there that might either have a partner in mind, but just didn't know that the US and Israeli governments is encouraging you to collaborate and offering you funding in order to do so. So if you have anything in mind, please reach out to me. There's two of us here in the United States. I'm East Coast and Midwest. We have a representative out in the Silicon Valley and a team in Tel Aviv. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, or I will bring up Lee to speak with you. Any questions? Yes. Can you stand up and tell me your name?
Hi, Seth Merrill.
Yes.
Senator Moshe Ben Abraham. As you may know, that United States government has what's called an IPO program. In other words, we look at people from other countries that want to come to the United States and invest at least $500,000 into the United States, into programs, into companies. Do you work with anything like that, any Israelis that want to come here, that want to establish a business here and continue with their companies in the United States?
So for us, what we typically find is that successful projects and successful partnerships will lead to those smaller Israeli companies setting up operations or facilities in an area that's close to their partners. It can be close to their partners, close to their investors. That's beyond our role. So our role is to facilitate those partnerships, to foster those relationships, and then to actually fund the projects that they're working on. After that, we let their business take them where they hope to go. But by facilitating the partnerships, we hope that it will bring them here to the US as opposed to Europe or Asia or somewhere else. Yes?
Yeah, you talk about funding,
Why don't you let him speak and then have questions at the end?
As part of that funding structure?
No. No, so we don't deal at all in offsets because that's more defense related. So all of our funding is for non-defense. Yes, so it's all non-defense. It's all commercial applications.
Because if you take questions, you won't have time to finish.
So, okay, so now it's my pleasure to bring up one of those innovative companies that Guy was speaking about, and one which we hope finds a great partner for bird funding. So I'm introducing Lee.
What did I do?
Mr. Fix-It.
Thank you, Guy. So first of all, my name is Lee, and I'm a business development manager at a company, a tech company in Tel Aviv called Automation. I arrived from Tel Aviv last night, and I want to tell you, I spent the last 24 hours here, and it's been such a pleasure, and I feel so welcomed, and it's been such an honor to meet such great people. So thank you for having me. Dan, thank you so much for having us here. So the three things I'm going to talk to you about tonight is, first of all, what is IoT? IoT is the Internet of Things. I'm sure it's a term that you've heard about before. I'm going to tell you about what we do at Automation, and I'm going to tell you how we help companies to become more efficient when they incorporate our technology into their business. So IoT. IoT is the Internet of Things. Did any of you hear about this term before? Yeah? Do you have an example that you'd like to share? No. Anyone else? No. Okay, everyone's hiding. IoT. IoT is the Internet of Things, the ability to connect any object to the Internet. IoT technologies allow us to collect, track, interact, monitor, and remotely control objects. What does it mean? Up until now, we heard about the Internet of People, how people connect through the Internet. LinkedIn, Facebook, email, that was our last revolution. The new revolution that is happening as we speak right now is the Internet of Things, the ability to connect any object to the Internet, to monitor that object, to control that object remotely through sensors. So, for example, if up until today, a farmer had to go to his land, to his greenhouse, in order to collect data on his yields, today he doesn't have to anymore. He can put a sensor in his greenhouse and control it from afar. He can collect information about his yield from afar. So that's an example of Internet of Things. Another example of Internet of Things that all of you guys have known about for years is ATMs. ATMs have been around, and they are part of Internet of Things. So what is the huge buzz about? What is different? If we've been collecting data from the actual physical world for so many years, why is IoT such a big deal? Why are all these companies, all these companies like Google, Telit, IBM, Salesforce, why are they all joining the IoT game? Because this IoT technology became so much cheaper, sensors have become so much smaller, and new protocols are on the rise. There are so many different ways to communicate now, and it's so accessible and efficient that all these companies have joined the game because they believe that this is the future. It's a huge economy, a huge market. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's a pretty big deal, as you can see. There are cloud companies. I'm sure you guys have heard about big data. Cloud companies, there are hardware companies and software companies that are all joining the game. And as you can see, Automation is in the center, my company. And what we do, we help enable IoT. These are the founders of our company. On your left is Guy Weitzman, and on the right is Eran Keshet. Guy Weitzman is our CEO. Eran Keshet is our CTO. They both have so many years of experience in the tech world, in the tech industry. Interesting things, they both are born and raised in Israel, but they actually met when they were getting their master's degrees in the US. And they both had a shared vision to easily connect any object to the Internet. And that is how Automation was born. So just like many entrepreneurs in Israel, people who have startup ideas, Guy and Eran went to Silicon Valley, and they had a whole different idea of what they wanted to do. And in Silicon Valley, they actually redirected our product and what we offer to fundamental industries. And they decided that they're going to target and help enhance IoT technology in fundamental industries, and that's what brought us to the Midwest. So from Silicon Valley, they came to the good old Midwest and started learning about fundamental industries. Oh, there are more of them. And started learning about and targeting fundamental industries. And they really realized that the Midwest is the heart of all these industries. This is where a lot of the ag industries are at, and medical and manufacturing, and they wanted to start learning about this region of the US. A cool, interesting fact is that a few months ago, we opened our office, our second office, in St. Louis, Missouri, because we have so much gravity there to grow. So a little bit about those industries and how we help them. In the agtech industry, we help farmers and growers, just like the example that I gave you a few minutes ago, we help connect their sensors to the cloud. So basically, if you're a farmer and you want to collect data on your yields, you can use our technology in order to connect those sensors and collect that data remotely, and also activate actuators. So let's say your soil is too dry, so you can turn on remotely your sprinkling system. Or if the temperature is not right, you can help it in one way or another. Another example is the industrial world. In the industrial world, we help manufacturers to save money and become more efficient. A good example of a company that we work with is Ameren. Ameren is an electric company located up in Missouri, or not up, somewhere in Missouri. And a project that we did with them was we put movement sensors that monitor movement on electric poles. They had a problem with electric poles that are collapsing and people losing their power. And we basically, by putting those sensors on their electric poles, they can now control, they can now see whether or not these poles are the movement and whether or not they're deteriorating, and anticipate which ones are not in good shape and repair them before there's an electric outage in the area. In the medical world, we work with a company called Hip Hope. They actually created this really cool belt where if someone falls, there is an airbag that opens up and helps cushioning the fall so that they don't hurt their hips. And our technology helps, it's basically we put in our chips, our atoms, in that belt, and now when that person falls, it communicates directly with either their doctor, the ambulance company, or their loved one, and they know that there is an incident, or if there is no movement, they can go and check on them. So that's how we work, an example for how we work in the medical world. In supply chain, we worked together with this company called Pointer, and we created a multi-sensor. It's this little chip that you put in a box, and that chip can monitor whether or not that box was open. It can locate the box where it is and helps logistic companies make sure that the supplies have made it to their destination safely. So how do we do what we do? So at Automation, we are an end-to-end IoT platform that enables any objects to become cloud connected so you can interact with that object. So if you have a sensor that you want to connect to the cloud, we can do it for you very, very easily and cost efficiently. Our technology is made out of 3 components. Our atom, it's a little chip that has an embedded code in it that can translate analogical information into electronical information. We developed a mobile SDK, a software development kit, that allows that information to be transmitted to the cloud, and also allows software developers to develop apps to communicate with that sensor. And the last thing is our cloud platform, which is a platform where you can run your analytics and learn and anticipate different things that are going to happen in your industry. This is our example of some of our clients. As you can see, Ameren, Hip Hope, and some of the other examples that I mentioned. And that's it. If you have any questions or ideas, or if you want to learn more about what we do, I'm here, and you're welcome to speak. Thank you.
All right, I want to thank our 3 speakers tonight. I don't know if there's any other questions that we have for them, or if anyone's interested in dialoguing, we can do that, you know, post our dinner. I do know that I do have some handouts here from the Bird Foundation that I'm happy to hand out to anyone who's interested after our meeting. So if there's no other questions, thank you for coming tonight.
Okay, before you go, Dan, the thank you notes are there. By the way, guys, before you leave, hello?
Yeah, for our guests.
Hello, before you leave, please sit down for a minute. 2 more important things. Sharing of certificates. Then would you do me the favor? And then the next 2 months, hey guys!
Okay, yeah, if I could have the presenters come on up to the podium.
I'm handing
We do have
over-
some thank you
I'm only
gifts to give out.
Thanks to Dan and Ted. And they'll make the announcement for the 2 next meetings. Thank you for coming.
And we look forward to everyone coming here on April 13th as well.
No, I was never going to.
As well as the April 13th meeting, we'll have our May 11th meeting where Dr. Bardo will be here talking about some of the exciting developments at Wichita State. And as Dan said earlier, we'd really like to have some input from people here in terms of the kinds of subjects they'd like to hear Dr. Bardo address. So please let us know those. Thank you all very much.
Ted, all the leaders and the head. Chief guest, take a picture. Marlon.
And we'd like all the people at the head table, the executive board members, and our guests to stay to have a picture taken.
Take the chairs. Now, anybody wants Australian wine, grab the bottle that is left over, hide on your back seat and take it.
Category all of your fantastic.
So we got Tony so bright.
Yeah. Yeah, just stop recording.